Welcome back to the Munro Minute. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about a guy, and I call him a guy because I'm not really sure how he would have liked to have been referred to, even if most people think of him as a philosopher. But this guy, as we'll call him, is Niccolo Machiavelli, who was born and grew up and worked for most of his days in Florence in the late 1400s, and at the peak of his political career at that time, he was the second chancellor to the Republic of Florence. Now at that time, Florence, like many other Italian city-states, I just gave it away, but Florence was a city-state, like many other Italian cities. So it was self-governing, and it was his own republic. So when Machiavelli was chancellor, he carried out a lot of diplomatic missions on Florence's behalf. But regime change came around, which, as we know from our medieval and Renaissance history textbooks, occurs about once every 3 or 4 blinks. So Machiavelli loses all his power and goes into exile. And like any good leader would do in exile, Machiavelli begins to write. And he writes the work that he is possibly the most notorious for to this day, which is called The Prince. And there, Machiavelli analyzes how power works, particularly in that day and age, but in a way that also makes it sort of relevant to what's going on right now and what has been going on with leadership up until then. And he writes that princes, the reigning monarchs of the Italian city-states, as many of them were called, need to be both compassionate when the scenario calls for it, but also very ruthless and calculating when the scenario called for that as well. Princes need to be prepared to do either one. And I think a lot of people often mistakenly focus on that second part. And they say that Machiavelli promoted this idea that, quote unquote, the ends justify the means. Which means that if I have a goal and that goal is justified, however it is, it doesn't matter whatever I do, how many people I kill, whatever it's got to take to get to that goal is what it's got to take. And there is nothing that any person's inferiors could do about it. And I think that that was certainly a part of what Machiavelli was trying to promote. But I think his larger message was that, nobody is really enforcing that a prince be the goody. And that not necessarily that the prince always needs to be the baddie, but the prince or any other person in power needs to be not so afraid to be the baddie. However, that may be interpreted in a particular day. And Machiavelli, in fact, goes on to write some more positive things later in his works, particularly in his Discourses on Livy. This part very much stuck out to me, in which he said, "It is not titles that make men illustrious, but men that make titles illustrious." So I think with running over 4 minutes, I'm going to end on that. Thanks very much for watching, and I will see you next time.